Marcus. So your artist statement talks about kind of your shift that's happened in photography as you've taken these classes where you thought that you needed to be out photographing people, but through the tools that you've learned, you learned that you can go to this really abandoned, unattractive place, but create interesting images because of the way that you're approaching your subject matter. So by getting closer, by changing your point of view, by waiting for the right light, all of these sort of things. So let's look at your images technically first. You're at ISO 400 for all of these images, so that's fine. You're out at one location, and let's see. Yeah, these were all shot around the same time. So as you're out photographing, there's no big change in the light, so you don't need to change your ISO. That's what I would want in this series, is that you don't change your ISO. Your aperture you keep between 4.5 and 7.1, I think it was. So kind of in that middle safe range. So I would just encourage you to push that a little bit more where it's appropriate. For example, this image might lend itself to more depth of field where you want the foreground and the train in focus. Where an image like this, you might want less depth of field. So instead of 5.6, your lens goes to 3.5. So to really have the shallowest depth of field possible where appropriate. Now let's just click through. I'm just looking at your shutter speed. And it's all fast enough. So it's all 200 or faster. So there's no issue with camera shake. The light in your images, it looks like you're out on a sunny day. So we see that here and we see that here. But then you are moving to different areas where you're getting, like maybe the sun moved behind a cloud here and you have this softer light that you're getting. Or here you're working in more open shade, opposed to having that bright light that could create some highlights that might be distracting. So even though you're photographing in the bright sun, you're photographing, it looks like early in the morning, 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning, you're finding the best light. Just want to make sure all these images are sharp. Yeah, this is really beautiful. Looking at all of that texture as we move back into the image and then seeing the buildings in the background of the city. This focus seems like it might be a little bit in front of where we want. It would be nice if right here was in focus, if that was your point of focus, but right now we're a little bit in front of that. Yeah, this also, the focus I think is a little bit in front of the center of the flower. So making sure that you have that center of the flower, kind of the eye of the flower is the sharpest point instead of these petals. Here maybe I had said maybe having a shallower depth of field, but maybe in order to have everything in focus, you need a little bit more depth of field. Yeah, everything's looking nice and sharp on those. The color in your images, you're working with this kind of rusty, like the color of dirt, the color of the brick. So these are more subdued colors, except for your one image of the sunflower type of plant where we have this bright pop of color. But in general, the images visually are cohesive by having that similar color palette throughout. The compositions are varied, which I think makes for a much more interesting series. If you had shot these all in a similar manner, I think it could be very boring. But having more of a landscape and getting low and looking at the details over here instead of the details of the tracks themselves, then looking at another overall picture, getting in and finding some more details, looking at the shapes and patterns, looking at the texture and the repetition, and again, looking at the shapes and patterns here. So lots of variety. I would even mix it up a little bit more. I might actually start with, when we think of a series, you want to think about how someone moves through the series. So I might start with one of these images that shows the skyline of the city in the background, because I think that really sets the mood for this, that this is an abandoned space that's further outside of the city, but so close to where everyone is. And I think that's can just be like a reflection that people have on the slightly out of the bounds of things that are publicized and everything, like, right? We're just moving right outside of the city to see the unseen, and you're giving light to that. So I think that's working really well in this series, especially since you have two images that show us that city in the background. So I think you have a visually cohesive series. I think you have a conceptually cohesive series. And I'm glad that you're pushing yourself to not have necessarily a live subject in any of these images, but looking at the landscapes. These look pretty interesting as well. I'm not sure what exactly we're looking at, a little like train town or something. So I guess that's not related to this, this area that you have. Repetition, this looks like a really interesting image also. I'm not sure what these are, but something else discarded. Nice job on this. This is a good final project for you, Marcus. You did a great job with this.